When people think of German tanks in World War II, they usually jump straight to the Tigers or the Panthers. But the Panzer III was the real workhorse of the early war, the backbone of Hitler's blitzkrieg to the gates of Moscow. Introduced in the early 1940s, the Panzerkampfwagen III was Germany's answer to the growing need for a dedicated tank versus tank platform. Earlier models like the Panzer I and Panzer II were mainly reconnaissance or infantry support, and while the Panzer IV did have a heavier gun, it was originally intended as a support vehicle too. This left the Panzer III to take the lead in tank duels. By 1941 we arrived at the Ausf J variant, the focus of today's video. This was the 9th major version of the Panzer III and arguably one of the most significant. The Panzer III J was a response to lessons learned in Poland and France. Earlier models had too thin armor and underpowered guns. The J came standard with the 50mm of frontal armor, which was a big improvement, and many later units had an extra 20mm bolted on, giving it 70mm total, quite decent for 1941. It was armed with a 5cm KWK-38L42 gun, a short-barreled 50mm that outclassed the 37mm used in previous variants. Against early war French and Soviet tanks, this was an effective step-up. It was powered by a Maybach HL120 engine, producing 300 horsepower, giving it a top speed of around 40 km on roads. It wasn't fast by modern standards, but it was reliable, and its torsion bar suspension gave it good cross-country capability for the time. The Ausf J was manufactured until December 1941. In 1941, several were dispatched as replacements for Panzer III losses on the Russian front. These Panzer III Js had been furthermore deployed to prepare the 2nd and 5th Panzer Divisions in September 1941. This J variant should not be mistaken for the later J1 variant deployed in 1942. Against T-26s, BT-7s and early KV-1s, the Panzer III J could hold its own. It wasn't invincible, but with solid crew training and good optics, it could outshoot and outmaneuver much of what the Soviets fielded early on. The appearance of the T-34 was also a slight game changer. Its sloped armor and 76mm gun were a nasty surprise. The short 50mm gun of the Panzer III J was mainly effective against the 40 and 41 T-34s. German commanders did rely more on flanking, combined arms, and lucky hits on weak spots. The Panzer III J wasn't the final variant. It was quickly followed by the models like the J1, the L, and the M, which had longer barreled 50mm guns and spaced armor. But by 1943 the design had reached its limit. It couldn't carry a big enough gun or thick enough armor to keep up with newer tanks. Ironically, as it was phased out of the main battle role, its chassis lived on, becoming the basis for vehicles like the Stug 3 assault gun, which became one of Germany's most produced and most effective armored vehicles of the war. So while it might not have had the fame of the Tiger or the Panther, the Panzer III and the Ausf J in particular was the tank that defined Germany's early armored warfare doctrine. It fought hard in some of the war's biggest battles and helped shape the tactics that dominated early World War II. In War Thunder, the Panzer III J is currently armed with the 50mm L42 gun, the shorter barreled version seen in earlier J variants. Historically, this gun could penetrate around 50mm of armor at 500 meters using the Panzergranate 39 APC BC rounds, which was enough to threaten the early T-34 1940 and 1941 models, especially from the side, and even damage the KV-1 under the right conditions. But here's where War Thunder stumbles. In-game, this gun feels underwhelming, especially against Soviet tanks it historically fought well against. The T-34 models at the same BR have seen buffs to their armor and mobility, making it difficult for the Panzer III J to compete, despite records showing these engagements were viable in real combat. But I'll definitely have a squiz and have a T-34 straight up. Okay, look at that. I hit him. He hits my entire turret ring out. There's no way that I can play this guy. Turret ring's gone. This isn't just balance, it's a break from reality. The Panzer IIIJ could take these tanks on. In War Thunder, you're often left bouncing shots, flanking desperately even when you shouldn't have to. While reloading rates are reasonably accurate, hovering around 4 seconds or so, the ammo's in-game penetration is arguably slightly underpowered, especially when compared to what this gun actually achieved during the early 1940s. The Panzer IIIJ had its armor upgraded from earlier variants, moving up to 50mm frontal armor, with many receiving 20mm of oblique plates, bringing the total to 70mm. It was a big improvement and helped it survive hits from 45mm Soviet guns and early 76mm rounds in range. War Thunder does show this visually. You get the bolted on armor and correct thickness values, but functionally it didn't feel right. The T-34s had terrible optics, very slow reload rates, and very low quality armor, and of course untrained crews. There's no indication in game of this, unfortunately, so while it looks right, it doesn't perform or feel right, if you know what I mean. The 5-man crew gave the Panzer III an advantage in survivability and performance. Having separate roles meant better situational awareness and quicker recovery from shock or injury. Now in-game, the crew layout is authentic, but the tight compartments seem to be incorrect, as it is well documented for the crew to be comfortable. Penetrating shots often knock out 2 or more crew members due to the cramped representation by War Thunder. I cannot confirm, but it does seem that this could have a factor. This is one of the areas where realism and gameplay mechanics clash. In reality, the tank had decent durability, but War Thunder treats it more like a glass cannon without the cannon part. Now, it's powered by a 300 horsepower Maybach HL120 engine. The real Panzer IIIJ reached up to 40 km an hour and was praised for its balanced mobility and reliability in both the Eastern Front and North African terrain. In War Thunder, mobility is a strong point. You'll hit speeds just over 40 km an hour, and the tank feels nimble, especially in comparison to heavier early war counterparts. It's quick enough to reposition, flank and support, which is exactly how it was used historically. Here's the reality. War Thunder currently places the Panzer IIIJ at a battle rating of 2.3, but the vehicles it faced are often historically strong. The T-34 1940 and 1941 have been buffed to the point where this tank, which was designed to fight them, is at a clear disadvantage. Historically, the Panzer IIIJ held its own during the early operations. Though the Soviet tanks were superior in firepower and armor, the Panzer III did in fact have better trained crews, optics and communications, and its 50mm gun could penetrate these tanks. So, War Thunder does miss the mark here, not in visuals or mechanics, but in historical balance. And that's the problem if you're trying to learn tank history through gameplay. So, did War Thunder get it right? In some ways, I would say yes. It's a faithful digital tribute to a tank that fought hard before being overtaken by the machines of war that followed. However, historical balancing, that's an entire different story, and War Thunder does miss the mark there. That being said, if you've enjoyed this comparison and want more tank history versus War Thunder deep dives, hit that like button, subscribe and tell me which tank we should cover next. And on that bombshell, I bid you all a farewell. Good night.